1793. In the streets of Paris, heads are literally rolling, and across Europe, monarchies tremble at the revolutionary fervor emanating from France. But in this cauldron of chaos and guillotines, one man, a young Corsican artillery officer, sees not anarchy but opportunity. Welcome to a story filled with alliances, betrayals, and the birth of a legend. Stick around, and you'll discover why the War of the First Coalition was nothing less than Napoleon's crucible. The French Revolution, a vortex of ideals, passion, and the cataclysmic collapse of the old world. Imagine the grandeur of Versailles disintegrating into the squalor of public executions. This was not just a rebellion, it was a cultural, social, and political earthquake. It violently shook the very foundations of feudal society and birthed notions of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But don't let these lofty ideals fool you. This revolution was an insatiable beast. It devoured its children with a hunger only matched by its relentless ambition. Picture the Parisian streets, filled with the intoxicating blend of fear and fervor. Tricolor flags waved alongside the grisly guillotine, an invention touted for its humane efficiency but symbolic of the revolution's brutal extremes. Within these tumultuous streets, heroes of yesterday became the villains of today, idolized figures turned traitors in the public eye, as whispers of conspiracy floated through wine-soaked taverns and candlelit salons. Maximilien Robespierre, once the revolution's stalwart champion, could testify to this swift fall from grace, if only he still had a head. And the villains? The villains had their own twisted fate. Some, like the deposed King Louis XVI, met their end staring up at a blade. Others were luckier, at least momentarily, clawing their way into the annals of history by whatever means possible, only to be devoured later when they too became inconvenient to the revolutionaries' ever-shifting ideals. Yet, in this chaotic maelstrom, this whirlwind of ideologies and bloodshed, emerged a man who defied all the odds. This man, this young Corsican artillery officer, saw not just chaos but a sprawling landscape of unparalleled opportunity. While others saw barricades, he saw stepping stones. Where others saw ruin, he envisioned an empire. Amidst the convulsive struggle between old and new, between monarchies and republics, this man, Napoleon Bonaparte, would find his stage, his audience, and most importantly, his destiny. So as you buckle your seatbelts for this epic journey through battlefields and political intrigues, remember, our tale isn't solely about the abstract virtues and vices of a revolution. No, it's about a real, flesh and blood man who managed to navigate this labyrinth of societal upheaval, and in doing so, became nothing less than a legend. Hold on tight. You're in for a ride through one of the most transformative and tumultuous periods in human history. And at its core, you'll find Napoleon, a man whose ambition knew no bounds and who would seize this revolution as his stepping stone to eternal glory. The French Revolution had not merely caused ripples, it had set off a tidal wave that threatened to engulf the entire European continent. When the Bastille fell and the cries of liberté, égalité, fraternité filled the air, monarchs and emperors across Europe felt an existential shiver crawl down their spines. Imagine sitting on a throne, lavished in silk and gold, only to hear that a few hundred miles away, people are gleefully chopping off the heads of individuals just like you. Unsettling, isn't it? They were right to be petrified, these monarchs who ruled by divine right. The French Revolution was a dangerous infection, a virus of ideas and insurrection that transcended language and borders. Revolutionary pamphlets and newspapers were being smuggled into neighboring countries, sparking discussions in hushed voices about freedoms and rights. Workers, peasants, and even members of the aristocracy began to question the God-given authority of their rulers. The genie was out of the bottle, and no amount of royal decree could stuff it back in. And so, what was Europe's antidote to this ideological contagion? A coalition, but not just any coalition, the First Coalition, a league of extraordinary powers, if you will. At the helm were Austria and Prussia, the double-headed eagles of absolutism. Britain, the maritime master of the world, threw in its lot, putting its naval might behind the mission. Spain, the Netherlands, and Portugal, each joined this grand alliance, united not by common values but by a shared dread of the revolutionary tempest brewing in France. Sealed with wax and royal blood, this coalition was a formidable behemoth whose tentacles stretched from the English Channel to the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. They declared their solemn mission to be nothing less than the obliteration of the French Revolution, the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy, and the reinstatement of the old social order. In other words, they wanted to turn back the clock, to unring the bell, to stuff the revolutionary genie back into the bottle, and cork it tightly with the seal of royal authority. It was, in the truest sense, a clash of worlds, the old against the new, tradition against revolution, divine right against popular sovereignty. It was as if the entire European continent had been drawn up into two opposing camps, awaiting the trumpet call to a struggle that would redefine the meaning of power, nationhood, and freedom. And who better to seize this moment than Napoleon Bonaparte, our protagonist who was always on the lookout for an opportunity to turn a crisis into a stepping stone for his own meteoric rise. Our man of the hour, Napoleon. You might be thinking, with all these grand empires and historic forces at play, how does a 24-year-old Corsican artillery officer even make a dent? Well, that's precisely where things get interesting. If you're expecting some gray-haired, battle-hardened general to seize the day, you're in for quite the surprise. No, the man at the heart of our story is young, fresh-faced, but don't mistake that youth for naivety. Napoleon was as sharp as the edge of the guillotine's blade. Imagine a France awash with revolutionary fervor, yet torn apart by internal conflicts, paranoia, and political purges. The Committee of Public Safety, the governing body that had become the revolution's ruthless custodian, was always on the hunt for traitors and spies. Many a general found themselves one tactical mistake away from a date with Madame Guillotine. It was a time of incredible uncertainty, a time when experience and seniority could be liabilities, as old norms and battle tactics came under scrutiny for their association with the Ancien regime. This climate of instability was, ironically, the perfect soil for an ambitious young officer like Napoleon to plant his seeds. While older generals hesitated, tangled in webs of political intrigue and paralyzed by indecisiveness, Napoleon was action personified. His mind was a crucible of Enlightenment ideals and military strategy, and he had the audacity to challenge traditional methods of warfare with fresh, innovative tactics. Far from being cowed by the revolutionary government's watchful eye, he found a way to make it work in his favor. He became the embodiment of revolutionary principles on the battlefield, principles of meritocracy, agility, and ruthless efficiency. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol. And let's not forget charisma. Napoleon had it in spades. He had this almost magnetic ability to inspire loyalty among his troops. In an era where the notion of la patrie, the fatherland, was gaining ground, Napoleon positioned himself as the vanguard of this new France. With each battlefield victory, he sent back bulletins filled not just with figures of enemy casualties, but also brimming with rhetoric that made soldiers feel they weren't just fighting a war, but participating in a historic crusade for liberty and the ideals of the revolution. So, to sum it up, in a landscape of uncertainty, where established figures faltered and staggered, Napoleon thrived. He wasn't just in the right place at the right time, he was the right man in the right place at the right time. As France and its enemies geared up for the epic struggle that was the War of the First Coalition, this young Corsican had already positioned himself as a rising star, waiting for just the right moment to leap onto history's grand stage. And as you'll soon see, that moment would come sooner than anyone, perhaps even Napoleon himself, could have ever anticipated. So, why is this chapter of history so pivotal in truly grasping the enigma that is Napoleon? To put it plainly, the War of the First Coalition was the crucible in which Napoleon's steel was tested, molded, and ultimately, forged into the sword that would cut through European history. In these chaotic years, amid seismic shifts in power and gut-wrenching tests of loyalty and courage, a relatively unknown Corsican artillery officer transformed himself into a figure of legend. Picture it, on one side, you've got a coalition of the greatest powers in Europe, armed to the teeth and buoyed by centuries of monarchical rule. On the other side, revolutionary France was a nation in the grips of political and social upheaval but propelled by the explosive force of its ideals. And right there, at the intersection of these colossal forces, stands Napoleon, a young man, practically a neophyte in the grand scheme of things, seizing this monumental conflict as his personal theater of operations. He navigates through political intrigues, military challenges, and cutthroat competition to emerge not just as a victor, but as a phenomenon. He was the flesh and blood manifestation of his age, a man who encapsulated the raw ambition, unyielding resolve, and strategic brilliance that would soon shake empires to their very cores. He leveraged every battle, every alliance, every tactical gambit as stepping stones on his path to immortality. From this crucible of war and revolution, he emerged as a household name, a name that would be both adored and abhorred, venerated and vilified. A name that would not just be written in the history books but would become the very title of an era, the Napoleonic Age. And there you have it, folks. Our journey through the labyrinthine tale of Napoleon's ascendancy amidst the cataclysmic events of the First Coalition has come to an end. If you reveled in this adventure through the annals of history, smash that like button like Napoleon smashed through the Austrian lines. Share this video far and wide, like revolutionary pamphlets in the streets of Paris. And don't just stand there, hit that subscribe button. More thrills, more drama, and more mind-blowing journeys into the past are just a click away. Till our next rendezvous in the rich tapestry of history, stay curious, keep that passion for the past burning, and remember, understanding yesterday is the master key to making sense of today. Au revoir.